What if I told you that reality isn't made of matter at all, but streams of living consciousness that respond to principles hidden in plain sight for millennia? This isn't another manifestation tutorial or self-help philosophy. We're diving into metaphysical laws that ancient Egyptian priests, Hermetic scholars, and mystery school initiates guarded as sacred science, knowledge systematically obscured from mainstream understanding because it reveals how consciousness literally architects physical experience. Every major spiritual tradition contains fragments of these principles, yet they're rarely taught directly. Instead, we've inherited watered-down versions that keep us believing we're separate from the creative force that shapes reality. Here's what they never told you. Your awareness isn't trapped inside a skull observing an external world. You're standing at the intersection where consciousness meets form, wielding the same creative mechanics that ancient wisdom keepers called the language of Thoth. You're about to remember something your soul already knows how to work with reality, as a living, responsive field of intelligence. Once you understand these hidden mechanics, every interaction with your world transforms completely. The threshold is open. Are you ready to step through? Let me tell you about Evelyn's mirror. She called me one evening, frustrated beyond words. "Everything in my house is falling apart," she said. "The mirror in my hallway cracked right down the middle yesterday, and I swear it's like looking at my life split in two." What Evelyn didn't realize was that her cracked mirror wasn't just a coincidence. It was a perfect representation of something far more profound happening in her reality. You see, that mirror wasn't just reflecting her face. It was reflecting the fractured state of her inner world, the deep division she felt between who she was and who she thought she should be. This is where most people completely misunderstand how reality actually works. They think manifestation is about wanting something hard enough, visualizing it clearly enough, or saying the right affirmations. But here's what Thoth understood that we've forgotten. Your outer world doesn't reflect your spoken wishes. It reflects the vibration of your deepest beliefs, the ones you might not even be consciously aware of. Think about it this way: when you look in a mirror, you don't try to fix your hair by combing the reflection, do you? That would be absurd. Yet this is exactly what most people spend their entire lives doing. They see problems in their relationships, their finances, their health, and they attack these issues directly, trying to manipulate the circumstances instead of recognizing that these external conditions are simply showing them what's happening inside their consciousness. The ancient Egyptians had a saying, "As above, so below." But there's a deeper layer to this that gets missed. It's not just that the macrocosm reflects the microcosm. It's that your personal reality is constantly broadcasting back to you the frequency you're operating on. Every person you encounter, every situation that unfolds, every opportunity that appears or disappears, it's all a living mirror showing you the invisible patterns running in your subconscious mind. Let me give you a practical example. Sarah came to me because she kept attracting the same type of romantic partner, emotionally unavailable men who would seem perfect at first, then gradually become distant and critical. She'd tried everything, changing her appearance, joining different social groups, even moving to a new city, but the pattern followed her everywhere. When we dug deeper, we discovered that Sarah's father had been emotionally absent throughout her childhood. Her subconscious mind had learned to equate love with unavailability, criticism with care. She was literally broadcasting a signal that said, "I'm only comfortable with love that comes with conditions and withdrawal." The men weren't the problem. They were the mirror showing her what she unconsciously believed she deserved. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sarah knew intellectually that she wanted a loving, available partner. She could visualize it, affirm it, even feel excited about it. But her deeper programming was running a completely different show. It's like trying to tune into a radio station. You might want to hear classical music, but if your internal frequency is set to heavy metal, that's what's going to come through your speakers. This is why so many people get frustrated with the law of attraction. They're like birds flying into a clean window, convinced there's something blocking their path to what they want. But the window isn't the barrier. Their inability to see it clearly is. They're so focused on the destination that they can't perceive the transparent beliefs creating the collision. I see this pattern everywhere. The business owner who can't understand why he keeps hiring employees who steal from him, not realizing he fundamentally doesn't trust people. The woman who complains about never having enough money while unconsciously believing that wealthy people are greedy and selfish. The man who wants perfect health but carries deep shame about his body, treating it like an enemy rather than an ally. The mirror doesn't lie, and it doesn't judge. It simply reflects. When you understand this, everything changes. Instead of trying to force different circumstances into your life, you begin to cultivate different states of consciousness. Instead of fighting with your reflection, you turn around and face yourself. The ancient practice I mentioned earlier involves a specific technique where you literally envision your reflection in the mirror of reality itself. But here's why this works from both a metaphysical and psychological perspective. When you consciously acknowledge that your external world is reflecting your internal state, you activate what psychologists call metacognition, awareness of your own awareness. You stop being unconsciously driven by your patterns and start consciously choosing your frequency. Now, I need to address something important here. Understanding that reality mirrors consciousness doesn't mean you're to blame for every difficult thing that happens to you. Life is complex, and there are collective patterns, family systems, and societal structures at play. But recognizing your role in creating your personal reality is actually the most empowering thing you can do, because it puts the power to change things back in your hands. When Evelyn finally understood this principle, she stopped trying to fix all the broken things in her house and started addressing the broken feeling inside herself. She began meditation practices to integrate the split between her authentic self and her conditioned self. Within 3 months, not only had her home environment stabilized, but she'd attracted a business opportunity that perfectly aligned with her true talents. The shift happens when you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start recognizing yourself as the broadcaster of your reality. But here's what most people don't understand, and this is crucial. You can't create this shift through willpower or positive thinking alone. There's something much deeper at work here, something that operates below the level of conscious thought. Words and intentions are just the surface layer. Beneath them lies the realm where real transformation occurs, where the frequency of your being actually gets recalibrated. And that's exactly what we need to explore next. Let me tell you about Henry, a software engineer from Portland, who spent 3 years standing in front of his bathroom mirror every morning, declaring with conviction, "I am wealthy, I am successful, money flows to me easily." His bank account, consistently overdrawn. His credit cards, maxed out. His stress levels about money, through the roof. Henry's story isn't unique. If you've ever tried affirmations and wondered why they didn't transform your life the way the books promised, you're about to understand something that most manifestation teachers either don't know or won't tell you. The universe doesn't respond to your vocabulary, it responds to your frequency. Here's what was really happening with Henry, and probably with you too. While his mouth was speaking words of abundance, his nervous system was broadcasting scarcity. His heart rate would spike every time he checked his bank balance. His shoulders carried the chronic tension of financial stress. His breathing was shallow from the anxiety of unpaid bills. Every cell in his body was vibrating at the frequency of not enough, while his mind desperately tried to override this with positive words. This creates what I call vibrational contradiction, the most common reason why conscious manifestation fails. Your mind speaks one language, but your heart, your body, your entire energy system is broadcasting a completely different signal. And guess which one the universe is actually receiving? Think of your human energy system like a radio broadcasting station. You're constantly transmitting a signal out into the quantum field of possibility. But here's the crucial part. That signal isn't determined by what you say or even what you think. It's determined by what you genuinely feel, especially what you feel in your body. When Henry stood there affirming wealth while his nervous system was flooded with stress hormones from financial anxiety, he was essentially trying to broadcast on 2 frequencies simultaneously. The result? Static, interference, mixed signals that cancel each other out. I learned this principle from studying the ancient Hermetic texts, but modern neuroscience backs it up completely. Dr. Candace Pert's research on neuropeptides showed us that emotions create actual chemical cascades throughout the body. These chemicals generate electromagnetic fields that extend beyond your physical form. You're literally broadcasting your emotional state into your environment, and that environment, including the people and opportunities that show up in your life, resonates with whatever frequency you're authentically transmitting. This is why you can speak of love while feeling the cellular vibration of loneliness, and somehow you keep attracting relationships that reinforce that sense of isolation. Or why you can affirm confidence while your body holds the posture and tension patterns of insecurity, and people respond to you as if you're unsure of yourself. Remember the story from the mountain temple about the old radio? The monk discovered that to receive a clear signal, he had to adjust the internal frequency of the receiver first. The broadcasts were already there, filling the air around him, but his equipment had to be calibrated to tune into them. Your consciousness works exactly the same way. The possibilities you want, wealth, love, success, peace, they already exist in the quantum field around you. But your internal frequency determines which ones you can actually tune into and receive. If your body-mind system is calibrated to scarcity, that's the channel you'll pick up, regardless of what affirmations you're repeating. Henry's breakthrough came when he stopped focusing on changing his words and started investigating his actual felt experience around money. He discovered that his body held decades of conditioning from a childhood where financial stress was the family norm. His father's anxiety about bills, his mother's constant worry about having enough. These weren't just memories, they were living patterns encoded in his nervous system, patterns that were actively broadcasting a frequency of lack. The ancient texts describe this as the difference between speaking from the mind versus speaking from what they called the resonance of being. When you're being, your entire energetic system aligns with your intention, that's when the magic happens. But here's why this is more challenging than just changing your words. Your body holds emotional patterns, like a library holds books. These patterns were often formed during childhood, when your nervous system was developing and highly impressionable. They've become your default frequency, running automatically in the background of your consciousness. To identify your true emotional frequency, try this. Close your eyes and bring to mind something you've been trying to manifest. Notice what happens in your body when you really imagine having it. Do you feel expansion or contraction, ease or tension, excitement or anxiety? Your body's response reveals your authentic frequency around that desire. Most people discover there's a gap, sometimes a chasm, between what they want to feel and what they actually feel. This isn't a problem to judge, it's information to work with. The ancient monks developed practices to recalibrate their internal frequency. They understood that lasting change happens from the inside out, not from the outside in. One technique involves what I call frequency layering, gradually shifting your emotional state by finding authentic bridges between where you are and where you want to be. If you're feeling scarcity but trying to affirm abundance, that's too big a vibrational jump. Your system will reject it as false. But you might be able to authentically move from scarcity to curiosity about abundance, from curiosity to appreciation for what you already have, from appreciation to openness to receiving more. Each step represents a genuine shift in your energetic frequency. Your electromagnetic field changes with each authentic emotional shift. This isn't mystical theory, it's measurable science. The HeartMath Institute has documented how coherent emotional states create measurable changes in the electromagnetic field around your body, and how these changes influence your environment in ways that classical physics is still trying to explain. The key is learning to feel your way into alignment rather than think your way there. Your thoughts are important, but they're not the primary creative force. Your feeling states are what sculpt reality at the quantum level. This understanding opens the door to something far more profound than positive thinking, or even traditional manifestation techniques. We're talking about the fundamental laws that govern how consciousness interacts with the fabric of reality itself. And those laws operate according to principles that most people have never been taught to recognize or work with consciously. Clara sat in that little tea shop on 5th Street, staring at her collection of crystals, sage bundles, and manifestation journals scattered across the worn wooden table. She'd been at this for 3 years. Now, collecting tools, following techniques, jumping from one spiritual practice to another, vision boards, moon rituals, chakra alignments, affirmations written in perfect cursive, the works. Yet here she was, still struggling with the same financial stress, the same relationship patterns, the same nagging sense that something fundamental was missing. The elderly woman at the corner table had been watching her with kind eyes. Finally, she approached. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Clara nodded, curious. "I couldn't help but notice your collection there," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. "Reminds me of myself 40 years ago, always searching for the right tool, the perfect technique." She paused, stirring honey into her tea. "Want to know what I discovered after decades of seeking?" Clara leaned forward. "There's only one law operating behind all of this, just one. Everything else, every crystal, every ritual, every spiritual practice you've ever encountered, they're all pointing to the same fundamental principle." She smiled. "Awareness creates experience. That's it. That's the whole game." Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Not the excitement of discovering a new technique, but the deeper recognition of a truth she'd somehow always known. You see, what Clara was beginning to understand is what every genuine spiritual tradition has been trying to convey through different languages and methods. Whether it's the law of attraction, Buddhist mindfulness, Christian faith, quantum physics, or ancient Hermetic principles, they're all describing the same underlying mechanism. Your quality of awareness, your depth of recognition, literally shapes the reality you experience. Think about it. When you truly recognize something as possible, not hope for it, not wish for it, but actually recognize it as real and available, your entire system aligns. Your thoughts, emotions, actions, and even your unconscious behaviors begin moving in harmony with that recognition. The universe, responding to this coherent signal, begins organizing circumstances to match your inner certainty. I want you to picture Maya walking across a stream using stepping stones. She can't see all the stones from where she starts, but she steps onto the first one with complete certainty that the next stone will appear when she needs it, and it does. Not because she hoped it would, not because she visualized it, but because she operated from unwavering recognition that the path would unfold. This is the difference between blind faith and aligned awareness. Maya wasn't operating on hope, she was operating from deep trust in an unseen order. She recognized, at a cellular level, that the universe is structured to support conscious intention when it's backed by genuine certainty. Modern quantum physics is actually catching up to what ancient wisdom traditions have taught for millennia. The observer effect shows us that consciousness doesn't just witness reality, it participates in creating it. When you observe a quantum system, your awareness literally collapses infinite possibilities into one experienced reality. Your recognition, your quality of attention, determines which possibility becomes your lived experience. This explains something you've probably noticed but never quite understood: why some people seem naturally lucky, while others struggle despite working just as hard. It's not about worthiness or cosmic favoritism, it's about the quality of their awareness and recognition. The person who consistently experiences abundance isn't necessarily more talented or deserving. They've simply internalized, at a deep level, the recognition that abundance is natural and available. Their awareness operates from this baseline assumption, so their reality reflects this back to them, not as magic, but as the natural consequence of consciousness creating experience. In business, you see this with entrepreneurs who succeed where others fail. They don't just hope their ventures will work. They operate from recognition that success is inevitable, that obstacles are temporary, that solutions will emerge. This quality of awareness attracts resources, opportunities, and synchronicities that seem miraculous to observers but feel natural to them. In relationships, some people effortlessly attract loving partnerships while others cycle through disappointment. The difference isn't physical attractiveness or social skills. It's the depth of their recognition that they're worthy of love, that healthy relationships are possible, that connection is their natural state. Their awareness creates experiences that match this inner certainty. Even in health, this principle operates. People who maintain vitality into old age often share a common trait. They recognize wellness as their natural condition. They don't fear aging or expect decline. They operate from awareness that their body is designed for health and healing. Their recognition creates experiences that align with this inner knowing. Now, about those tools Clara had collected, the crystals, vision boards, and rituals. They're not powerless, but understanding this principle reveals how they actually work. They function as focal points for awareness, not as sources of power themselves. A crystal doesn't emit magical energy, but it can help you focus your recognition on specific intentions. A vision board doesn't attract circumstances, but it can train your awareness to recognize opportunities you might otherwise miss. This understanding is profoundly liberating because it means the power was always within you. You're not dependent on external circumstances, tools, or other people's approval to create the experiences you desire. Your recognition, your quality of awareness, this is the creative force that shapes your reality. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to manufacture recognition through mental effort, forcing themselves to believe something they don't actually recognize as true. This creates internal conflict, mixed signals that produce inconsistent results. Real recognition can't be forced. It emerges through understanding and direct experience. When you begin to see how this principle operates in small ways, your capacity for deeper recognition naturally expands. Start by noticing where you already operate from certainty. What areas of your life flow easily? What do you take for granted as natural and available? That's recognition in action. Begin practicing with low-stakes situations. Recognize that you'll find a parking spot, that the right information will come when you need it, that conversations will flow naturally. As you experience this principle working in small ways, your capacity for recognizing larger possibilities grows organically. The key is cultivating what I call relaxed certainty, a state of knowing without attachment, recognition without desperation. This is where your emotions become crucial, serving as a guidance system for the quality of your awareness. When your recognition feels peaceful and natural, you're aligned. When it feels forced or anxious, you're trying too hard. Clara left that tea shop with a completely different understanding. She still had her crystals and journals, but now she knew they were simply tools for focusing the one power that had always been available to her, the creative force of conscious recognition. Her whole journey was about to change, not because she'd found a new technique, but because she'd discovered the principle underlying all techniques. And this recognition would soon reveal something even more profound about how to navigate this creative process, the sophisticated guidance system that's been operating within you all along, constantly showing you when you're aligned with your deepest recognition and when you're working against it. Vera had everything she thought she wanted. Corner office on the 37th floor, six-figure salary, respect from her colleagues, and a title that impressed people at dinner parties. But every morning, she'd sit in her car in the parking garage for 10 extra minutes, gripping the steering wheel, feeling like she was drowning in success. The achievement she'd worked decades to reach felt hollow, like wearing clothes that didn't fit her soul. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Alexandra pulled out her compass during a mountain expedition and noticed something strange. Instead of pointing magnetic north like it was supposed to, it seemed to be pointing toward her heart. Her guide laughed and called it broken, but Alexandra had learned something profound in that mountain village the night before. Sometimes what appears broken by conventional standards is actually working perfectly. What if I told you that your emotions aren't random reactions to circumstances, but rather a sophisticated navigation system designed to guide you toward your highest path? This isn't feel-good philosophy. This is how the universe actually operates, and it's been hidden in plain sight your entire life. Think about the last time you felt genuinely excited about something. Not the forced enthusiasm you put on for others, but that bubbling, expansive feeling that seemed to come from nowhere. That wasn't just a chemical reaction in your brain. That was divine intelligence speaking through your emotional guidance system, confirming you were moving in alignment with your soul's purpose. Here's what they don't teach you in school. Emotions are signals, not sentences. Joy, excitement, and deep peace aren't rewards for good behavior. They're confirmation that you're aligned with your true path. Anxiety, frustration, and that gnawing emptiness aren't punishments or character flaws. They're loving redirections from a universe that wants you to thrive. Your emotional compass works exactly like Alexandra's mysterious mountain compass. It's always pointing toward your personal true north, which isn't a geographic location but your highest potential in any given moment. The problem is, society has convinced you that this compass is broken, unreliable, or something to be overridden by logic and social expectations. Remember Henry from our earlier discussion about frequency? He discovered that the universe responds to our energetic state, not our words. Well, your emotions are both the indicator of that frequency and the steering wheel that changes it. When Vera finally paid attention to that morning dread in her parking garage, she realized her emotional compass had been trying to redirect her for years. Let me show you how this actually works in practice. Sarah, a talented lawyer, kept getting sick every Sunday night. Doctors found nothing wrong, but her emotional compass was screaming that her career path was misaligned. When she finally listened and transitioned to environmental law, something that genuinely excited her, the Sunday sickness disappeared entirely. Her body had been her ally all along. Or consider Marcus, who felt inexplicably drawn to a particular neighborhood every time he drove through it. Logic said he couldn't afford to live there, but that sense of expansion and possibility was his emotional compass pointing toward his future. 3 months after he started visualizing living there, an unexpected opportunity allowed him to move in. His emotions weren't just guidance, they were actively creating that reality. This is where most people get confused. They think emotions are too subjective, too unreliable to trust for major decisions. But here's the distinction that changes everything. There's a profound difference between reactive emotions based on past conditioning and authentic emotional guidance arising from soul wisdom. Reactive emotions feel heavy, constrictive, and often accompanied by mental stories about why you should be afraid or angry. They're rooted in past experiences and future fears. Authentic emotional guidance, on the other hand, feels expansive, even when it's redirecting you away from something. It comes with a sense of knowing, rather than a story. Here's a practical technique Alexandra learned in that mountain village. Every morning, before checking your phone or engaging with the world, place your hand on your heart and ask, "Do I feel open or closed today?" Don't analyze the answer, just notice it. If you feel closed, gently ask, what would help you open? If you feel open, ask what direction that openness wants to move toward. This isn't about making impulsive decisions based on fleeting feelings. It's about developing the sophisticated skill of reading your internal navigation system. When you're considering a job opportunity, notice, does thinking about it create expansion in your chest, or does it feel like a weight settling on your shoulders? When you're with certain people, do you feel more alive and authentic, or do you notice yourself contracting and playing a role? The reason society teaches us to ignore this compass is because people who follow their authentic guidance are harder to control. They don't stay in jobs that drain them just for security. They don't buy things to fill emotional voids. They don't accept relationships that diminish their light. A person who trusts their emotional compass becomes a sovereign being, and that threatens systems built on compliance and consumption. Clara, whom we met in our discussion of universal laws, discovered this when she stopped collecting external spiritual tools and started trusting her internal guidance. Her emotional compass led her away from expensive workshops and towards simple daily practices that actually transformed her life. The frequency shift Henry experienced happened because he finally aligned his actions with his emotional truth rather than fighting against it. But here's where it gets really interesting. Your emotional compass doesn't just guide you toward what's already there. It's also a creative force that actively shapes reality. When you follow genuine excitement and expansion, you're not just finding pre-existing opportunities, you're generating them through the vibrational alignment between your inner state and external circumstances. This is why following your emotional guidance often leads to what others call lucky breaks or synchronicities. You're not just passively receiving guidance, you're actively participating in the team braid creation of your reality through the frequency you're emanating. The joy you feel when contemplating a particular direction isn't just confirming it's right for you. It's literally magnetizing the circumstances that will make it possible. Consider Rachel, who felt inexplicably drawn to photography, despite having no experience or connections in that field. Every time she imagined herself as a photographer, she felt that unmistakable expansion. Instead of dismissing it as impractical, she followed that emotional guidance. Within 6 months, a chance conversation at a coffee shop led to an apprenticeship with a renowned photographer. Her emotional compass hadn't just guided her toward an existing opportunity, it had helped create one. The key is learning to distinguish between desires born from lack or social conditioning and desires that emerge from authentic expansion. Authentic desires feel like coming home to yourself. They energize rather than exhaust you when you imagine pursuing them. They often make no logical sense but feel absolutely right in your body. This emotional navigation system works in perfect harmony with what Clara discovered about universal laws. Your emotions aren't separate from manifestation, they are manifestation in action. Every feeling is both a message about your current alignment and an active participant in creating your future reality. As we prepare to explore something even more profound, consider this. If your emotions are divine guidance pointing you toward your highest path, and if your desires are the creative force that shapes reality, then perhaps those desires themselves aren't random wants or selfish impulses. Perhaps they're something far more sacred, direct communications from the universe about who you're meant to become and what you're here to create. Ruthie sat in her corporate office, staring at the vision board she'd hidden in her desk drawer. Images of art studios, children's book illustrations, and creative workshops filled the small space. But every time she looked at it, that familiar voice whispered, "Selfish, impractical. Who are you to want something so frivolous when there are bills to pay and responsibilities to meet?" For 3 years, she'd dismissed these longings as childish fantasies. After all, wasn't spiritual growth about transcending earthly desires? Wasn't wanting things the root of suffering? She'd been taught that good people sacrifice their dreams for duty, that desire was the enemy of enlightenment. But what if everything we've been taught about desire is backwards? What if your deepest longings aren't obstacles to overcome, but sacred instructions from the universe itself. Here's what changes everything. Desire isn't some random impulse or earthly greed bubbling up from your lower nature. Desire is the eternal force of creation seeking expression through your individual consciousness. Just as the ocean creates waves, the infinite creates desires within you as its instrument of expansion. Think about this for a moment. The universe is constantly evolving, constantly creating, constantly expanding into new possibilities. But how does it do this? Through consciousness, through beings like you who can dream, imagine, and then bring those visions into reality. Your desires aren't separate from this cosmic process. They are this cosmic process, speaking through you. When Ruthie finally understood this, everything shifted. That longing to create children's books wasn't her being selfish. It was the universe recognizing that the world needed the specific stories only she could tell, delivered through the unique lens of her experience and imagination. Her desire contained the blueprint of becoming. This reframes the entire spiritual journey. Instead of transcending desires, we're meant to honor them as divine communication. Instead of seeing them as temptations pulling us away from our path, we recognize them as the very mechanism by which our path reveals itself. Consider how natural this is. A seed doesn't question its longing for light. It doesn't analyze whether its desire to grow is spiritually appropriate or worry that reaching toward the sun makes it greedy. The seed simply follows its nature, and in doing so, fulfills its purpose in the larger ecosystem. Your desires work the same way. They're your nature's way of guiding you toward your role in the cosmic ecosystem. So why have so many spiritual traditions taught us to distrust desire? Often, it comes from a misunderstanding of what desire actually is. They've confused ego-driven grasping with soul-inspired longing. They've mistaken the symptom for the disease. True desire, the kind that comes from your deepest self, doesn't feel like desperate clinging or anxious wanting. It feels like inspiration. It feels like joy, anticipated. It feels like wings unfolding. When Ruthie connected with her authentic desire to create, she described it as coming home to myself. There was no desperation, no sense that she'd die without it, just a quiet, persistent knowing that this was her path. Ego-driven wanting, on the other hand, comes with urgency, comparison, and a sense that you're incomplete without the thing you want. It's usually based on what you think you should want, the promotion because society values success, the relationship because you're supposed to be coupled, the house because it signals status. Here's how to tell the difference. Authentic desires feel expansive. They make you more yourself, not someone else's version of who you should be. They connect you to something larger while honoring your uniqueness. When you imagine following them, you feel energized, not drained. Conditioned wants feel contractive. They come with shoulds and supposed tos. They make you feel like you need to become someone different to be worthy of what you want. They're often accompanied by the voices of parents, teachers, or society telling you what a successful life looks like. But here's where it gets interesting. The universe uses all forms of desire to create expansion and evolution. Even material desires serve the cosmic purpose. That longing for a beautiful home might be the universe's way of inspiring you to create a sanctuary where healing happens. The desire for financial abundance might be preparing you to fund the projects that will change lives. Your dreams are not too big. They are precisely sized to the soul that holds them. The fact that you can conceive of something means you have the capacity to birth it into reality. The universe doesn't make mistakes in its distribution of desires. When we ignore our authentic desires, we don't become more spiritual. We become stagnant. We cut ourselves off from the very force that wants to create through us. Depression often follows because we're literally depressing the life force that seeks expression through our unique gifts and longings. I've watched this pattern countless times. People who honor their soul's calling, even when it seems impractical, find ways to make it work. They discover resources they didn't know existed. Opportunities appear. The path reveals itself step by step, not because they're lucky, but because they're aligned with the creative force of the universe. Meanwhile, those who dismiss their desires in favor of what seems sensible often find themselves successful but empty, achieving goals that never quite satisfy because they weren't their goals to begin with. The guilt around having desires, especially material ones, comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how creation works. The physical world isn't separate from the spiritual world. It's spirit made manifest. Matter is energy slowed down enough to touch. When you desire beautiful things, experiences, or circumstances, you're participating in the universe's love affair with its own creative potential. Tonight, I want you to try something different. Instead of pushing away your desires or analyzing whether they're appropriate, have a conversation with them. Sit quietly and ask, what are you trying to show me? What wants to be created through me? How are you guiding me toward my highest expression? Listen without judgment. Notice which desires feel like invitations and which feel like obligations. Notice which ones make you feel more alive and which ones make you feel smaller. Notice which ones connect you to your authentic self and which ones try to turn you into someone else's idea of success. Write down what you discover, not to create another to-do list, but to acknowledge the divine dialogue that's been happening within you all along. Your desires are love letters from the universe, showing you the next steps in your evolution. But here's what most people miss, and it's why their manifestation efforts feel like swimming upstream. They try to force their desires into reality through willpower and technique, not realizing that resistance to this natural flow is what creates the struggle in the first place. Louisa sat at her kitchen table at 6 a.m., clutching her manifestation journal like a sacred text. She had written her desire for a new career opportunity 17 different ways, created vision boards, set daily affirmations, and even calculated the exact salary she needed down to the penny. For months, she'd been orchestrating every detail of how this manifestation should unfold, which companies should call, when the interview should happen, even what the office should look like. But instead of her dream job materializing, she found herself more anxious than ever, checking her phone obsessively and feeling like she was pushing against an invisible wall. What Louisa didn't realize was that her very efforts to control the manifestation were creating the energetic resistance that blocked it from arriving. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive principle in all of metaphysics. The universe operates through a sophisticated intelligence that transcends simple cause and effect, and our attempts to micromanage outcomes create vibrational friction that repels what we're trying to attract. Think about what happens when you're desperately trying to remember someone's name. The harder you grasp for it, the more it passens, slips away. But the moment you relax and let go, it pops into your consciousness effortlessly. This same principle governs manifestation, but we've been conditioned to believe that more effort equals better results. A mechanical worldview that completely misses how consciousness actually operates. When we're anxious about our manifestations, constantly checking for signs, and trying to control the timeline, we're broadcasting a frequency of lack. We're essentially telling the universe, I don't trust that this is coming, so I need to manage every detail myself. That distrust becomes the very barrier between us and our desires. Let me share Xavier's story, because it perfectly illustrates this principle. Xavier was an avid fisherman who prided himself on his technique and preparation. One particular morning, he arrived at his favorite lake with the best equipment money could buy, armed with detailed knowledge about water temperature, fish feeding patterns, and optimal bait selection. For hours, he cast his line with precision, adjusted his position constantly, and grew increasingly frustrated as other fishermen around him began catching fish while his line remained empty. The more desperate Xavier became, the more frantic his efforts grew. He changed bait every 15 minutes, moved to different spots around the lake, and even started making noise in the water trying to attract fish. But his desperation was palpable. Other fishermen could feel his anxious energy from across the lake. Finally, exhausted and defeated, Xavier set his rod aside and simply sat back against a tree. He wasn't giving up exactly, but he released his death grip on needing to catch a fish. He began watching the sunrise instead, feeling the morning breeze, and actually enjoying being in nature rather than treating it like a conquest. Within minutes of this shift, his rod bent with the weight of a significant catch. Then, another and another. What changed wasn't Xavier's technique or the fish's behavior, it was his energetic state. When he was forcing and controlling, he was emanating desperation, which fish can actually sense through water vibrations. But when he released his grip and moved into what I call active allowing, he became magnetically attractive to what he desired. This is crucial to understand. Active allowing isn't passive waiting or giving up. It's a state of alert receptivity, like a skilled surfer who reads the waves and positions himself perfectly to catch them, but doesn't try to create the waves himself. The reason our attempts at control backfire is that our limited human perspective cannot see the infinite connections and possibilities that universal intelligence can orchestrate. We're like someone trying to conduct a symphony while only hearing the violin section. The universe has access to variables, timing, and synchronicities that our conscious mind could never calculate or arrange. In career manifestation, watched countless people push away opportunities by trying to force specific outcomes. Sarah spent months networking aggressively and applying only to companies that matched her exact criteria, but her dream role came through a casual conversation with a stranger at a coffee shop, someone she never would have strategically targeted. Her forcing energy had been closing doors, while her moment of natural, unguarded conversation opened the perfect one. The same pattern shows up in relationships. David created detailed lists of qualities he wanted in a partner and approached dating like a military campaign. His intensity and agenda were palpable to every woman he met, creating an energetic wall that prevented authentic connection. But when he stopped hunting for the one and started genuinely enjoying social activities for their own sake, he met his future wife at a bookstore, not even trying to meet anyone. Creative projects follow this principle as well. Artists know that their best work often comes when they stop forcing inspiration and allow themselves to be channels for something greater. The more they grasp and control, the more stilted their work becomes. But when they trust the creative process and allow ideas to flow through them, magic happens. Here's what most people fear about releasing control. They believe nothing will happen if they're not constantly pushing and managing. But this reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how the universe operates. The universe is actually more invested in your success than you are, because your fulfillment serves the expansion of consciousness itself. You're not separate from universal intelligence, you're an expression of it. Think of how a flower grows. The seed doesn't strain and struggle to become a rose. It follows organic laws, drawing nutrients from soil, reaching towards sunlight, and unfolding according to its inherent design. If a gardener tried to force a flower open by pulling at its petals, would destroy it. But by providing proper conditions and trusting the natural process, they witness miraculous transformation. Your manifestations follow the same organic laws. They're not mechanical results of force and effort. They're natural expressions of consciousness aligning with itself. There's an old story about a monk who spent years pushing against a massive door in a monastery, believing his spiritual practice required him to eventually move it through pure determination. He pushed until his hands bled, recruited others to help him push, and became obsessed with conquering this door. One day, exhausted and defeated, he accidentally leaned against the door and it swung open effortlessly. It had been designed to pull, not push. He'd been exerting tremendous energy in a direction that could never work. Most of us are pushing against doors meant to be pulled, wasting enormous energy on approaches that create resistance rather than flow. So how do you recognize when you're in resistance versus flow? Resistance feels tight, anxious, and effortful. You find yourself constantly strategizing, checking for results, and feeling like you're swimming upstream. Flow feels easeful, inspired, and naturally motivated. Actions arise organically rather than from force, and you feel supported by circumstances rather than fighting against them. When you notice resistance, try this practice. Place your hands on your heart and say, I release my need to control how this unfolds. I trust that universal intelligence knows the perfect. Then take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, what would feel good right now? Follow that guidance instead of your control agenda. Another powerful technique is what I call outcome detachment with process engagement. Stay deeply committed to your desire, but become flexible about how it arrives. Engage fully in inspired actions while holding your specific expectations lightly. This isn't about being passive or weak. Surrender is actually the most powerful stance you can take because you're aligning with forces far greater than your individual will. You're moving from rowing against the current to setting your sails and catching the wind. The deepest truth about releasing resistance is that it requires profound trust. Trust in universal timing, trust in intelligence beyond your own, and trust that your desires exist because they're meant to manifest through you. When you truly understand this principle, you realize that your imagination becomes the bridge between allowing and manifesting, which opens the door to possibilities that your controlling mind could never have orchestrated. Nora had always been a vivid dreamer, but when she started drawing her nighttime visions, something extraordinary happened. The sketches seemed to pulse with their own energy. A cafe she drew from a dream appeared on a corner she walked past months later. The garden layout she imagined became her neighbor's renovation project. What she initially dismissed as coincidence became impossible to ignore when her drawing of a specific vintage car showed up in her driveway. Her uncle had decided to gift her his restored 1967 Mustang, the exact model and color from her sketch. This isn't magical thinking, it's the mechanics of creation itself. Your imagination isn't the frivolous escape modern society has trained you to believe it is. It's the most sophisticated creative technology you possess, the bridge between formless potential and manifest reality. Every single thing in your physical environment began as someone's imagined possibility. The chair you're sitting on, the device you're watching this on, the building around you, all of it existed in consciousness before it existed in matter. Hassan learned this principle when he started sketching architectural visions that came to him during meditation. Buildings with impossible curves, structures that seemed to defy conventional engineering. His colleagues dismissed these drawings as artistic fantasy until Hassan began presenting them as actual proposals. 3 of those impossible buildings now stand in major cities, their curves and flowing lines exactly as he first imagined them. The unseen always precedes the seen. But here's what most people miss about imagination. There's a profound difference between casual daydreaming and purposeful imaginal creation. Daydreams are mental entertainment, fleeting, disconnected from emotional investment. True imagination is consciousness actively interfacing with possibility, creating energetic templates that reality follows. When you sustain an imaginal experience with genuine emotional energy, you create what quantum physicists call coherent field patterns. Your consciousness isn't separate from the quantum field, it's an active participant in it. The emotional intensity of your imagination creates measurable electromagnetic signatures that influence probability, patterns around you. This isn't metaphysical speculation. It's the mechanics of how consciousness participates in reality creation. Think about every major breakthrough in human history. The Wright brothers didn't just accidentally stumble upon flight, they imagined it so completely, so emotionally, that they could feel themselves soaring before they ever left the ground. Tesla saw his inventions operating in his mind with such clarity that he could run them, test them, and improve them entirely in imagination before building the physical prototypes. Einstein didn't discover relativity through calculation alone, he imagined riding alongside light beams until the physics revealed itself to his consciousness. But most people sabotage their imaginative power through 3 critical mistakes. First, they focus on the specific details instead of the feeling state. You don't need to visualize exactly how your desire manifests, that's the universe's job. Your job is to inhabit the emotional reality of having what you want. When Nora drew her dreams, she wasn't trying to control outcomes. She was feeling into the energy of what wanted to emerge through her. Second, people approach imagination from a place of lack rather than fulfillment. If you're imagining from, "I don't have this," you're energetically affirming absence. True imagination begins from the assumption that what you desire already exists in potential and you're simply calling it into physical form. Hassan didn't imagine his buildings because architecture was missing from the world. He felt the completed structures so completely that physical reality had no choice but to match that energetic template. Third, most people contaminate their imagination with doubt and resistance. Remember what we explored about releasing control? The same principle applies here. The moment you start questioning how your imagination could possibly manifest, you're introducing resistance into the creative process. Doubt creates energetic static that interferes with the coherent field patterns your imagination generates. The relationship between imagination and belief is crucial to understand. You don't need to believe your imagined reality will manifest, you need to believe in it while you're experiencing it imaginatively. When you fully inhabit an imaginal scene, feeling it as real and present, you're not hoping it will happen someday, you're experiencing it as happening now. That present tense emotional reality is what creates the magnetic field that draws physical circumstances to match. Here's a practical technique that works with the natural mechanics of consciousness. Instead of trying to visualize specific objects or outcomes, feel into the emotional state of your fulfilled desire. If you want a loving relationship, don't imagine a particular person, inhabit the feeling of being deeply loved and appreciated. If you desire creative success, don't picture specific achievements, feel the satisfaction of expressing your gifts fully in the world. Your nervous system can't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a physical one when you're fully emotionally present. This isn't a limitation, it's a feature. When you imaginatively experience your desire as fulfilled, your entire being begins operating from that reality. Your thoughts, decisions, and actions naturally align with that state, creating what appears to be synchronicity, but is actually coherent field resonance. The ancient mystery schools understood this completely. They knew that consciousness creates reality through imagination saturated with emotion. What they called sacred imagination is what quantum physics now describes as observer effect consciousness, actively participating in the collapse of possibility into actuality. This connects directly to everything we've explored together. Your desires arise from the same source that creates through imagination. Your emotions provide the pound of energetic fuel that makes imagination magnetically attractive. When you release resistance and stop trying to control the how, your imagination becomes a clear channel for creation itself. The most practical knowledge you can possess isn't technical skills or academic credentials, it's understanding how your consciousness interfaces with reality. Every moment, you're imagining something. The question isn't whether you're using imagination, it's whether you're using it consciously and purposefully to create what you actually want. This ancient wisdom about consciousness creating reality isn't esoteric philosophy, it's the most practical science of living. When you understand that your imagination is the creative interface between thought and form, you stop waiting for permission from external circumstances and start taking conscious responsibility for your experience. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."